Hi, everybody. We are back. Chapter 1, Section 1.3. So we're going to briefly talk about the ethical principles of psychological research. So as you can imagine, there may have been some unscrupulous people doing some testing on other people in the past. And one of the probably most egregious examples in US history is the unethical research that was done in the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. So I don't know if any of you have heard this, but Tuskegee is in Alabama. And basically this experiment lasted from 1932 to 1972, okay, 40 years. And it was researchers from the US Public Health Service, so the government, who recruited 400 poor Black men. Some were prisoners, soldiers, mental health patients, people that were in asylums and hospitalized, and they deliberately injected them. They gave them syphilis and gonorrhea to test like the procedure or the progression of the disease. And then to later, when we developed penicillin as a treatment in 1947, to test the effectiveness of penicillin. Well, we talked before about having the control group and the experimental group. So here, one of the things they did, the experimental group actually got the penicillin, the control group didn't. So they were actually letting these men who had volunteered die, suffer, horrible illness, just because they wanted to say, oh, well, we have to have a good experiment. So obviously that is not allowed. That is not good behavior. So this led eventually to kind of the development of a code of ethics for conducting research on humans. So the APA, the American Psychological Association, has a code of conduct for ethical conduct. First and foremost, you can do no harm. So you cannot put someone in risk, harm, or danger purposefully. The second part is informed consent. You actually have to explain to the person what you're going to do, explain the risks. Like, those guys in the Tuskegee thing, like, hey, we're going to inject you with penicillin and then withhold treatment and just see how long it takes you to die. Probably wouldn't have agreed to do that. So that's called informed consent. And you always have to get informed consent. So you explain everything. The participant has to understand and still agrees to participate. Researchers cannot coerce or force participants to be in the study. You must inform the participants that they can stop anytime. Anytime they want, they can stop. Of course, as a researcher, that's not great for you, because if it's like, oh, I don't like doing this anymore, or this is boring or whatever, they can just quit and there's nothing you can do about it. So they have to know that they can quit at any time. You also agree to maintain the confidentiality of your participants. More ethics is that you have to maintain privacy of their personal data or their personal information. You have to inform users of social media and smartphones when you're collecting data. So this is kind of new. You have to actually get consent. You know how it pops up like, oh, okay, is it okay if we track you, right? So you have to allow to that. Or agree to that if you are going to allow them to use your data, because that is your personal data, your screen time and what sites you visit. And you can say, no, I'm not allowing you to track me and use my data. Researchers can use deception, but they should try to avoid it. So the only time that you would want to, you would need to use deception if you're kind of looking at questions, research questions, where people might not be so honest. One example, one of my favorite research studies is there was this study to look at kind of how people responded to people of the same race and of different races. And so a lot of times if you ask people those questions, they're going to say, oh, I'm not racist. I love all people the same. All people are equal, right? So they had to kind of figure out a way to get to the root of some of the things or some of the issues. So what they did was they put an ad in the paper and they said, hey, we are going to asking people to participate in a study where we're looking at this new vehicle. And so you come down to the car dealership and you sit in the vehicle, you kind of feel the ergonomics, see how it feels to you. You take a look at it and then you just tell us, what you like or what you don't like. Oh, and we'll pay you $20. Okay, that's not bad. I could do that for $20, right? And so then they go down and then you go, okay, I'm here to, check out this car and get my $20. And they say, well, the car's just getting cleaned up just in the shop a little bit. It'll just be like 5 minutes. So just go in this waiting room over here. This is where the real test is happening. So there's a person who's already in the waiting room. So they have chairs set up so you can sit next to the person or far away from the person. And that was what they were really trying to see. Well, the question was that what they would do is they would have a white person who was the participant. They didn't know what was going on. And then they'd have a black person sitting in the room. And they wanted to see, will this white guy sit next to this black guy, or will he sit farther away from him? Then the next time they would have a white person in the waiting room, see, oh, will the white guy sit next to someone who looks more like him or sit farther away? Okay, they did this experiment also on Black and Hispanic or Latino to see, oh, well, will you sit next to someone who looks more like you in skin tone, or will you sit farther away from someone who is opposite of you or different from you in skin tone? And they found that most people, Black, white, and Hispanic, are more likely to sit close to someone who looks more like their skin tone and farther away from someone who is different, as extreme difference in skin tone. So does that mean everyone's racist? No, not exactly. So it's this idea of in-group versus out-group. So in-group is people who look like you tend to have more comfortability with, like think of your family. Most of your family probably kind of looks like you, right? That's what makes you family. A lot of our friends tend to be similar to us in various aspects. So we tend to gravitate towards people who are more like us. But it does give us some insight into how maybe racism can develop, right? So if you already have this kind of inherent uncomfortability or fear of someone who doesn't look like you, and then other things in your life influence that, whether it's the opinions of your family members or what you see on the news or all these other factors, it can actually result in inflating or increasing racism. So we're actually going to look a lot more at those topics when we get to the social psychology part, but just a little brief, that was just to say, we can use a little deception. But then of course, at the end, the researchers must debrief. So what that means is they would have had to confess, like, hey, listen, we tricked you. We weren't trying to get you to come down here to look at a car. We were really just trying to see who you'd sit next to. So that's debriefing and an ethical requirement. Psychologists must make certain standards and follow these guidelines when conducting research with non-human animals as well. So there is a committee that's at every research institution called IACUC, which stands for Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee. Anytime you're proposing to do research using animals, you have to submit your research proposal to this committee, and then they can decide whether to approve it or not. Animals are always required to be treated humanely and in accordance with all of the laws and regulations associated. So yes, we do animal research, but it does have to get approved, and it's not just willy-nilly to do whatever you feel like. Written reflection number 3 for chapter 1. So it's true that prisoners, so if you're in prison, you may not feel like you can truly be voluntary to participate in a psychological research. So I want you to think about and jot down your answer and then submit it with all your discussion post. What steps can be taken to ensure that a prisoner who participates in a research study is actually making a voluntary, informed decision to do so? So how can we ensure that? That's it for this section, and you will see me back for the next one.